everyone, this is Rick Prokop at Piano Power Lessons. In a previous video 6 months ago, I demonstrated that when playing a passage at medium speed or faster, something like this, or something like this, or something like this, that the fingers had to lift off the keys prior to pushing down the key. And it could have been 1/100 of an inch, but there has to be a little lift off the key, and I refer to that as the firing of the finger up, down, up. And I've wanted to follow up that video with a video about trills and tremolos, which don't require that the key come fully up, and therefore don't require that the finger comes off the key as you're trilling or tremoloing. And that video would require me to slip the action out of the piano and to show you the mechanics of what's really going on under the hood, with specific emphasis on the parts of the action that allow us to repeat the notes like this. So why don't we start by just defining and explaining all of the parts involved. So this entire apparatus that you're looking at is known as the piano action. And with a moderate amount of difficulty, this entire action can be picked up and slid in to what's called the key bed of the piano. So let's take a look inside that without the action. So here we are on a level with the key bed, and inside we see a whole series of what are called underlevers, and these are damper underlevers. So when you depress a key, the back of the key comes up and lifts the damper underlever, and the damper is up here sitting on the string, and as long as the key is depressed, the underlever has that damper lifted up and the string is allowed to resonate freely. So this entire apparatus that you're looking at is known as the piano action. Okay, let's take a look at the three major parts of the action. First of all, we have what's called the key frame, and that is the part that slides into the key bed. And on top of the key frame, we have the actual keys and this large structure containing many components known as the action stack. Now the key is like a seesaw, and everything's moving in circles with the piano, including your fingers, right? Everything's moving circularly. This is a fingertip, it's an arc. This is an arc if you use your wrist. So same thing with the key. And it's like a seesaw, and this would be the fulcrum of your seesaw, right? Enabling this to come down and the back of the key to go up. And underneath the fulcrum of the key is called a balance rail. And right under the bottom of this key, on the balance rail, there's this little pin, and on the pin are paper and felt punchings, similar to these punchings down here on the front rail, that enable us to set an exact height for this key from this point to the key bed. And each manufacturer specifies an exact measurement from this point to the key bed, you know, whether it be a Steinway, a Baldwin, Yamaha, they're all a little different, but you have to do it exactly according to their specifications, otherwise the other components of the action won't work exactly the way that they should work. And one other specification for the key is the amount that the key goes down, and that's just under 3/8 of an inch for a Steinway. Other components of the key are the back check, which catches the hammer after the key is fully down and the hammer releases. And hard to see, but a little screw down here called a capstan screw, and I'll give you a better view of that. And the capstan screw there you see those little brass screws under there, and that's how the action of the key, let me see if I can get one here, that's how the energy of the key is delivered to the action stack. So you can see the capstan screw there. The capstan screw allows us to set the height of the hammer in relation to the strings, and that distance is 1 7/8 inches, which is 5 times the amount of the key depth. So the cool thing is we're getting 5 times the distance here compared to the distance here, and that's called a 5-to-1 mechanical advantage. All right, let's zero in on the components of the action stack. All right, so this is the hammer that comes up, hits the string, bang, makes a sound. The hammer is attached to a hammer shank, and the shank swivels on a flange, which is screwed in to the hammer flange rail. And the hammer flange rail is this tubular construction invented by Steinway in the late 1870s, and it's very strong, so strong that you can stand on the action and it will withstand the weight of a guy standing there. Attached to the hammer shank is what's called the hammer knuckle, and the positioning of this knuckle in relation to everything else is really crucial and determines how heavy the action will be. The further back this knuckle, the heavier the action. And to give you an idea, 1/8 of an inch back will increase the down weight, or the force needed to push a key down, by 8 grams. So it's really important that you get the right knuckle in the right place when you're rebuilding an action. Additionally, right on top of the hammer flange, there's what's called a drop screw, and that regulates, as we'll see in a few minutes, how far back the hammer drops after it lets off. The next part of the action is the most important and the most ingenious invention, the history of which I will discuss later on. But first, let's take a look at the parts. So this piece is called a repetition, and it enables pianists to play repeated notes and trills and tremolos quite easily without the hammers getting stuck or bobbling and doing things that you don't want the hammer to do. So as far as the different parts go with the repetition, this is the repetition's flange, and it's attached to a tubular rail in the back of the action, just like the hammer flanges are attached to a tubular rail. And this part over here is called the jack. As you'll see, it also moves circularly. Everything moves circularly. See, the whole repetition is moving circularly, the jack is moving circularly. And then this piece up here is called the balancier. And the balancier is what you'll see the hammer sits on this, specifically the knuckle of the hammer sits on this. And we can regulate the height of the jack in relation to the balancier with this screw back here, and then we can regulate the positioning of the jack under the knuckle that sits here with this particular screw here. And additionally, there's a spring situated under the balancier which can be tightened or loosened, and that determines how fast the hammer springs back up towards the string after it catches in the back check. And then there's a spring down here attaching to the jack, which guarantees that the jack will spring back into position under the knuckle. Okay, now that you know the names of all the parts, let's go through the sequence of events that occurs when you push a key down. And there'll be more of an explanation after this. But the key goes down 3/8. The hammer goes up 1 7/8 inches. And a 1/16 of an inch, here's a string up here, a 1/16 of an inch before it hits the string. Watch what happens over here with the jack. The jack releases from the knuckle and the hammer falls back, and that's called let off. Now, the hammer falls back a 1/16 of an inch, so now it's 1/8 of an inch from the string. And the jack is way forward of the knuckle. It's past the knuckle. And then we have a thing called aftertouch. So after it lets off, falls back, there should be a little aftertouch in the key, and you do that by just pushing down again and seeing that the hammer moves a little upward. And it just gives you a nice feeling when you're playing, when you have aftertouch. So after the hammer lets off, we have what's called the drop point, and we adjust that so that all the hammers drop to exactly the same point, which is approximately 1/8 of an inch from the string. Then I mentioned that you have the balancier spring here that you can tighten or loosen, and what that affects is the speed at which the hammer releases back in the direction of the string. Okay, the faster it is, the faster the action feels. And so when you've heard the term, well, it's a fast action, or want to speed the action up a bit, that would refer to that. So what you need to understand is prior to the invention of this repetition, a hammer would do this, bang, and it would catch in the back check. There was no way that they could figure out how to get this hammer to just float up there near the string until the repetition was invented with this balancier here that's spring-loaded. So this is what allows you to have repetition. You see, I don't have to release the key entirely. I can just, be pushing down on the key and not coming all the way back up with the key. So it allows quick repetition. And this is called, for that reason, a double escapement action. You have the single escapement of the jack, but you also have this double thing going on. It escapes, and the hammer is still situated very close to the string, whereby you can get repetition. All right, and I just want to finish this lesson with showing you a picture of the rudimentary repetition that was invented by Sebastian Erard in 1821. And I'll compare this with, here's the modern repetition flipped around. And right up here, you can see the jack here. There wasn't a capstan screw, so there was an attachment here at the bottom of the repetition to the key. So it was very rudimentary, but it was a huge innovation for the times. And this invention by Erard just completely changed the technology of piano action. And it's basically, has continued on until this day, and they keep tweaking it and adding new things to it to make it more efficient. But that's basically when it all started. And what's crazy is that this was invented in 1821, and Beethoven dies in 1827. So for the bulk of his life, he didn't have this. He didn't have this kind of action. Chopin's born in 1810 for the first 11 years of his life. Who knows if even in 1827 he was able to get a piano with this kind of action. So they were playing on really rudimentary pianos, and I don't envy them in the least. So that should do it for today. Hopefully I'll get this action fixed in the next couple of days or next week, who knows, and we'll get back to having piano lessons. In the meantime, I hope you have a great day and a really happy upcoming new year. Okay, take care.